They say that lower beings get attracted to places where you're having conversations about them.
If you light a candle, then you're going to draw things to it.
I've heard there is a certain Indonesian tribe that is an expert in trapping lower beings into physical bottles, and there's a lot of millionaires all over Asia who travel to Indonesia to purchase these lower beings.
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful thing that anyone can do. You're handing someone who isn't trained a loaded gun.
What's the purpose of calling them?
You're tasking them to carry out something that you can't do. People who are drawn to this kind of work risks sanity, misfortunes, accidents, things breaking. It goes terribly wrong.
You know what Ouija boards are?
Yeah, if you're calling a spirit so that you can be...
Really?
Yeah.
The Nazi symbol is an inverted swastika. The one we use in Sanatan is one of the most divine symbols. A lot of people in India think Adolf Hitler knew this and twisted it to cause that level of death and suffering in the world.
I agree with you. The Nazi regime is worshipping in return for material things. I've been chased out of the woods at night by spirits.
You could visually see them?
Yeah. Most of the time when you're seeing these spirits, they'll be materializing in things like smoke. Seeing something visually is very jolting. It's very difficult to do. I think it's very difficult for them to do and sustain.
Damn. Horror returns on TRS. This is one of our scariest episodes of the year. You're going to enjoy this one if you enjoy all our horror episodes. I do recommend that you check out the prequel to this episode. It was our first conversation that we recorded with Peter Gray. You'll gain a lot of context for the sake of this one, but if you're just here for the thrill, this is a pretty mind-bending episode. I'm not going to say too much. Peter Gray returns on the Ranveer Show once again. Back with Peter Gray for episode 2. Thank you for visiting my life. That's what I want to begin with.
That's great. It's wonderful to talk with you, Ranveer.
How are you, Peter?
Really good. Really good.
You all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bow down to Babylon at the beginning of this episode, and then we'll begin.
That's great.
Okay. Have you conveyed my respect to her?
Yes.
Okay. You think she wanted this episode to happen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There is an element of her bringing us together.
Yeah.
In my eyes, it's just Shakti, which is the overall divine feminine.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Right? Because the Kali Ma I pray to also arises from the Shakti in the same way that the Babylon that you pray to arises from. Because at the end of the day, there's only one piece of divine femininity.
Yeah.
Fair to say?
Perfect.
Okay. Where do we even begin this particular conversation? You tell me. Is there something that we missed out on in the last conversation that you'd like to bring up?
No, I think you're doing a perfect job. So wherever you'd like to go.
Do you want to begin by talking about lower beings a little bit? Because in our world, they say that when you actually begin your practice, you do attract the attention of lower beings. Because what you're doing in terms of your tantra rituals and your puja releases a lot of energy in that physical space. And where there is a release of energy, lower beings also get attracted. Lower beings also get attracted to places where you're having conversations about them. So firstly, you guys do your thing, guys. I know that these conversations attract these entities. What I want to tell the viewers is, with the power of the divine, you'll always be protected. So just believe in the power that the divine contains. Peter.
I completely agree with you. We have the same thing in our tradition. Like if you light a candle, then you're going to draw things to it. And it's about whether you're able to move those things forward or whether they become a problem and you become parasited, for example, by these kind of lower entities. So the understanding of lower entities is there. And that's why anyone who's engaged in the serious practice of Western magic needs to pay very close attention to their spiritual hygiene. So that means performing those practices and rituals which prevent those things getting stuck to you. So very simple things like living in a clean space, keeping all of your materials in your household in a clean, calm, positive, like organized fashion, not living a disorderly life, because this will tend to bring more disorder to you. And then engaging in some of the basic rituals. So before we perform any ritual in Western magic, there is a process of purification, particularly involving the use of a ritual bath. So you'll bathe before you perform ritual, and particularly I use a lot of salt. I use salt water a lot as a way of like cleansing the energetic system and keeping everything absolutely clean.
Can you use it every day?
You can use that every day.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a saltwater bath and performing a blessing over the waters before you enter the waters is an extremely powerful thing that anyone can do as a way of just keeping themselves clear and clean of these entities. And then again, when one is performing a magical ritual, a lot of the work that we do, if you're doing work within a magical circle in a very high ceremonial fashion, you'll be doing a banishing or a purifying ritual before you even begin to call in any of the entities that you wish to have present with you. So the process of doing this, of repeating this over and over again, day in, day out, year in, year out, you begin to create barriers to negative forces or forces you do not wish to attract coming in. And then using discretion. So very often in Western magic, if you're calling a spirit rather than a deity, there are a series of challenges that you issue to the spirit so that you can be sure that what you're talking to and what you're working with is what you think it is, and not something else impersonating that spirit. So there are a whole range of protocols that we use there.
Okay. Lots of tangential questions. Starting with the magic circle. Is it about the size of this carpet?
It can be any size based on how many people you're working with, but this would suffice. It really depends on the amount of room that you have. There are classical ideas about how large it should be, but in practice, it really depends on the area that you're working in.
Now, I assume that when you're inviting a deity, that's a very difficult process that you probably have to earn.
Yeah.
Right? And it perhaps would take years to reach that point.
Yeah.
So you said that these circles are used to call higher spirits.
You normally use them for working with like a range of spirits, whether they're positive or whether they're hostile. It's the same thing. You're creating a clean space within which you can work, where you know that the energies are balanced and where you have a clear idea that where you are and where the spirit is, to prevent the spirit causing problems for you.
But what's the purpose of calling them?
What's the purpose of calling them? Well, there are a range of things. Generally, you're tasking them to carry out something for you that you can't do. So whether that's bringing you intelligence, whether that's performing a task, whether that's fetching you something, the whole range of like magical possibilities.
Understood. And you have to be sure that the spirit you're calling is genuinely benevolent.
You have to be sure. It doesn't have to be benevolent, but you have to be sure that it is who you're talking to. It's not just a random smaller spirit that's impersonating that spirit.
Do you have names of particular spirits in mind when you're calling them?
Yes. Yeah.
So are these people that have existed?
So we work with a range of spirit catalogues in the West that are called grimoires. A grimoire comes from the word grammar, and these are books that contain lists of spirits and the symbol of the spirit, and also the magician's kind of loose notes about what these spirits are able to accomplish, what they're able to do, their possibilities.
Can you give some examples of those tasks?
Okay, so those tasks can be anything from bring me a book, to get me a job, to find me a lover, to show me where something is which is hidden. A whole range of possibilities.
And they're always able to perform those tasks?
Generally, they're able to perform the tasks. If they're not, then you go back and you reassess what went wrong. Are you not able to do this? Do you not have the power to do this? Does the spirit not have the ability to do this? You go back and through and check these things. It's almost a scientific method.
Okay. And again, you learned this through books and people.
And this is something you learn through books and people.
It's been 30 years that you've been a practitioner,
Yep.
right? Okay. And you're fairly confident in this process at this point.
Yeah, I'm confident in my processes.
Are you comfortable with me asking you how often you engage in this every year?
How often I engage in this? So I'll perform. So I'm doing a series of rituals every day. So I'll do a small ritual in the morning. I'll do banishing ritual and work with deities in the evening. I'll do my meditation. I'll do a range of spiritual practices, a major evocation, a major summoning of a spirit. For me, I tend to work maybe every 3 months. I'll do a major spirit work.
For the sake of some purpose.
For the sake of a purpose, yeah.
Is the purpose material?
Sometimes it can be material, yeah.
Okay.
There's no moral understanding that asking for something material is bad. That's not on a hierarchy.
Okay. Are there celebrities and people who are materially extremely successful who've used these methods to gain material progress?
I think it's very difficult to tell. I think very unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Why very unlikely? It's difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's time consuming. It's a set of particular specialist skills. Do I think that people are achieving things because of spirits? Yes, I think that happens. But I think it's more informal rather than formal ritual work that gets those results for people.
So you're one of the few people in the world who knows how to do this in an experienced manner.
In my experience and my understanding of magicians located around the world, there are very few individuals who are doing this. Very few individuals. There are only ever very few individuals who do this level of work.
What is the trade-off here?
It's dangerous. There are risks. There are risks to your health. There are risks to your sanity. There are risks to your reputation socially. There are risks to your spiritual development. It's very easy to be pulled off center when you're doing this kind of work, particularly as most of the magical work that's going on in the West is being done by individuals or small groups. This isn't being done necessarily in a community in a larger setting. So the people who are drawn to this kind of work are not always balanced individuals. Some of these individuals are crisis individuals. Some of them will end up having mental health issues. Some of them will end up with drug addiction. Some of them end up with a whole range of problems. Psychosis, certainly.
Pardon me for overly simplifying this, but this seems like the beginning of a potential horror movie for people who don't know how to do the ritual correctly.
Yes, it certainly can be.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly what we see in horror movies can happen if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. I think there are genuine risks for performing these kinds of spiritual operations.
But will that process of negative outcomes happen because of the spirit being upset with how you've done the process or just being malevolent?
On one level, we're food. The way that we react, as you see with a horror movie as an example, is that many of these entities respond to human emotions, and fear is a very strong emotion. And you'll know that certain spirits will try to provoke a fear reaction in people in order to feed on that energy. And so it's easy for people to end up in a parasitic relationship where the entity is taking something from them without the terms being negotiated effectively and from a position of strength.
But how will it try to scare you?
How it tries to scare you? Any number of ways. Simply appearing, simply like the presence of a spirit is something that people are so unaccustomed to. They're so not used to seeing. The idea that there are entities out there which are beyond them, which are not within human bodies, that can move through things, that can speak through things, that can cause problems and misfortunes. These aren't ideas that are common in the West. People have forgotten a lot of this. They've forgotten that they live in a world filled with spirits. And when they become aware of that, it can be a frightening place.
Exactly like a horror movie.
Yes, it can be exactly like a horror movie.
It'll create incidents at home.
Yeah. Okay. Misfortunes, small accidents, things breaking.
Can it cause physical harm?
It can cause physical harm through other means, yes.
Like
Directly actual accidents is a good example. Directly intervening, no, but those accidents happen.
But can these entities scratch you or something small like that?
I've not been scratched by an entity, but I know that gets recorded.
Okay. Has an entity ever gotten upset with you?
Not particularly upset with me, no. I'm very careful and martially minded about what I do. I don't like to leave anything that may be an opening. And I do my divination before I do work. I'm very clear about what I'm going to do. And I go in, I perform the work, and I get out, and I close, and I make sure that everything is as clear as possible. But you can't prevent everything. You know, I've been chased out of the woods at night by spirits. You know, I've had, you know, we all end up with a few bumps and bruises along the way.
Are you comfortable sharing that story?
In general terms, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So we were working in some woodlands that we'd done a significant amount of work in previously in terms of preparing the site and being used to spirit of place. And
You mean you were doing rituals?
Yeah, we've been doing ritual there for a while. It's always important when you're working somewhere to see how a place changes through a year and through the times and through the seasons. And we'd built a circle, a permanent circle out of white quartz stones that we'd laid out in the woods. And we turned up organized to do a ritual that we've been planning for some time. And when we arrived, the circle was already being used.
By entities.
Because
it's useful to them as well.
Because it was useful to them as well.
But you could visually see them?
Yeah.
Are you comfortable talking about what they look like?
I'm not going to talk about what they look like. But
okay.
we realized that this was not the correct time to be performing that work. And we hightailed it out of the woods.
Okay. But they had faces.
Yeah.
And not pleasant faces.
It was clearly not our place to intrude.
Okay. And they could have caused you harm.
I'm sure they could have caused us harm, yeah.
Could they have killed you?
I have no idea.
Okay. But when you spotted them, they spotted you as well.
Yeah.
And that's why they chased you out.
Yeah, we ran.
Okay.
We ran.
This is a whole group of people running away.
This is a group of people who all had the experience, who'd all turned up ready to work.
Okay. But once you ran away, did they bother you?
No, they were fine. They were just doing what they were doing.
They just want to be left themselves.
Just needed to be left alone.
You know, in the previous episode, we were speaking about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata.
Mm.
Actually, we've created a series on my YouTube channel about the Ramayana for the Western viewer.
Okay.
So I can't give too much context in this conversation, but it contains a lot of material on Raakshasas that dwell in forests.
Mm.
And I've tried probing a lot of guess on what this element of Rakshasa is. It sounds a lot like lower entities that are also powerful in their own way. So in my eyes, the story that you're relaying sounds like it's a Rakshasa. Because I've noticed that most of the West assumes that lower entities are only ghosts, which are spirits of people who had untimely deaths or who committed suicide. But lower entities are of different types as well. and there are some more evolved lower entities, which in ancient Sanatani texts are called Raakshasas. So this seems like these were Raakshasas, like powerful entities.
Yeah, that's what it sounds. It sounds appropriate.
Okay. Have you heard the word Raakshas?
No, I haven't. No.
But it sounds parallel.
It sounds parallel.
Because in the story of the Ramayana, they bother the rishis, like the sages who are trying to go about their rituals in the forest. Okay, sounds very parallel to me.
But these things happen, and again, when you're performing magic, you expect a degree. There's also a degree of resistance that you find. So very often, that if something's pushing back, if things are not necessarily flowing, and there are obstacles to overcome, sometimes that's a sign that you are heading, in fact, in the right direction, and that it's something that you have to overcome. But on this one, I'm very happy to let the spirits have their place and do their magic without me trying to evict them.
Yeah. What about the ritual you've done at home? You're comfortable doing a ritual alone by yourself?
Yeah.
But you said you run those entities through some tests?
Yeah.
To filter out the negative ones?
Sure. So when you're working with an entity in the West, then you'll check several things. You'll check things like you'll check the name. You'll see whether they give you the correct name. You check the number of the name. If you can do gematria, if you can add up and create the value of the spirit, you'll ask it questions to see what degree of knowledge it has. Does it know something that you don't know or wouldn't have access to? And you test it with these things. You look at the appearance, you look at the signs, and you make sure that they're congruent. And they're congruent with what you're looking for. And if those things don't match up, then something's wrong.
So these things appear in the physical form in front of you?
In terms of getting physical manifestation is like a very rare thing. Like it's very difficult to, if we lived in a world where you saw spirits in full physical form with your open eyes in normal circumstances, we would live in a very different universe. So most of the time when you're seeing these spirits, they'll be materializing in things like smoke. Smoke's often used to create something for them to take a form out of, or you'll see them in your mind's eye. So this is a process of meditation. Then there's temperature changes, there's sounds, there's smells, there's all of these other things. Like seeing something visually is very jolting. It's very difficult to do. And I think it's very difficult for them to do and sustain.
Because even that requires energy from their part.
Yeah, creates a great deal of energy. And when you look at the magical texts, which talk a lot about physical entity manifestation, and you look at the incenses they're using, you find that they're very often using things like the Solanaceae alkaloids, like they're using a datura incense. They're using like quite powerful psychoactive drugs, which enable you to see these things manifest. But I wouldn't recommend those methods.
So there's things that will happen in the room.
There are things that will happen in the room. Yeah.
Like light?
Yeah, light phenomena is very common. Yeah. And you'll use when you're looking at like yes, no answers, you'll do things like you'll perform divination, asking the spirit questions. You'll use pendulum, for example, is a very common method where you're holding a pendulum and you're asking it yes, no questions so that you're establishing a dialogue. So those kind of practices.
And you've had to tell many spirits to leave.
Not a great deal. No, I'm pretty precise about my working methods.
Okay, you go about your ritual in such a way that you're able to attract only the right spirits.
Yeah, I work very methodically, and then as you work over time, then you tend to find that there are a small group of spirits who are particularly amenable to your energy, who you work with more. So the most famous spirit catalogues we have, there's in England probably the Ganesha, also called the Lemegeton, also called the Lesser Key of Solomon. This is a list of 72 spirits, and these have been used by magicians in the English-speaking tradition for hundreds of years.
Spirits are limited to geographies?
Spirits are limited to, well, they're not limited to geographies, but it's easier it's easier to go somewhere where there are spirits than to call spirits where there are no spirits.
Okay.
So if there is a particular working that you wish to do, it's kind of easier to go somewhere wild and remote to do it than it is to try and do it in your front room. And also there are spirits that you don't necessarily want to call into your house.
Fierce ones.
Yeah. So if there are fierce, volatile, and difficult spirits, it would be foolish to invite them to come into your private space.
Is it the equivalent of meeting a murderer out in the world and then saying, "Hey, I live here, by the way"?
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. Yeah. Particularly if you have young children or you have other people in the house who could be obsessed or have problems, you don't want to invite that into you.
Do you watch horror movies at all?
Not really, no.
Why not?
I'm just not really interested.
Okay. Have you watched movies generally?
Yeah,
Like,
generally.
in your life?
Yeah.
Have you ever watched a movie where you felt like, hey, they're talking about my kind of world?
There's a modern film called A Dark Song. There are some problems with it, but that's quite an interesting representation of a modern ceremonial angelic summoning ritual. I think that could give you a flavor.
Okay. So when you're calling these spirits to you, I asked you earlier if they were malevolent or benevolent, and you said that neither. It's like a spectrum. You can't bracket things.
Yeah, I don't like to bracket things. I mean, there are certainly spirits that are dangerous. There are spirits but it's like all of these things. Like, is a knife good or bad? Like it's is a gun good or bad?
It's just its nature.
Yeah, is a car good or bad?
Is a tiger good or bad?
Exactly. And that understanding of the universe, that there are all of these forces in it, and they're all doing their thing, and they're all doing it in their place. The question is this the right place for a tiger to be, or is this the wrong place for a tiger to be?
Okay. But it is the equivalent of calling a lion or tiger into your vicinity.
Yes, it certainly can be.
So say you go about a task with them. How does your relationship with that entity develop then?
Okay, so they become familiar to you calling them. So they know who you are. But at the same time, what you do traditionally in Western magic is that you take the form of a previous saint within your line. So in the Western tradition, it's Solomon from the Bible, because the story of Solomon is that in the construction of Solomon's temple, he called the spirits and he tasked them to build the temple for him. So many of our magic books go back to the example of the way that Solomon worked, and they repeat that pattern. So when the magician is in the circle and doing their work, they dress in that fashion and they present themselves to the spirit as that figure of spiritual authority. So it's not I that commands the spirit, it's Solomon who is talking to the spirit.
And you feel the presence of Saint Solomon
You
as well?
can do that, yes.
Do you feel it?
Yeah, I use a different method that I won't talk about here, but using those ancestor figures, using those powerful ancestor figures is one way that we work.
Have you ever felt any amount of fear?
Yeah, I think fear is natural and healthy.
Even in these situations?
Yeah.
Even today?
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely necessary.
What makes you feel fear?
Do you feel nervous before you do a podcast? Do you perform better if you're nervous?
Understood. You're sharper in the head.
You're sharper. Like if your adrenal system is firing and you're able to deal with the fight or flight reflex and you're able to channel that in the correct direction, then it's a valuable thing.
Do you mind that I'm probing this much?
No, not at all. It's
Okay.
all completely fine.
I'm wondering why Goddess Babylon wants this material out there. In my eyes, when I've spoken about lower entities on the show,
Sure.
the downside is that it's attracted them into my life a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The upside is that people get fascinated by the person.
Yeah.
So again, while we're going to continue this conversation, I would like to point viewers to the previous conversation we did, because I think that episode 1 would set the context for everything we're
Yeah.
speaking about right now and further. And that's what I think Goddess Babylon wants, that
Mm.
people need to know much more about the context that you and me are coming from, rather
Yes.
than just this one isolated part of this very vast subject.
Yeah.
Fair to say?
Fair to say. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
In saying that, let's dive back into what we were talking about. Say once the ritual is over,
Hmm.
do they choose to stay around you because they like you?
I hope not.
Okay.
No, I mean, well, you can bind spirits, like you can, but you're keeping them somewhere safe. Like when you create a spirit home, when you create a spirit trap, if you put a spirit in a bottle, yeah. So we go back to the Aladdin example. Like if it's in the bottle, yeah, or the lamp, yeah, and the lamp is somewhere safe, then it can stay in the lamp, okay, and it can be happy there, or it can be held there. But it's a relationship where the magician has to be confident with their authority over the spirit, their ability to dominate the spirit if necessary. And also, very often there's an understanding that the work we're doing is going towards the evolution of the spirit. This is very often a way that people have thought about this, that when one works with a lower spirit, with an elemental spirit, that you're helping bring it up to another level, in the same way that we have a relationship with domestic animals. You know, you have a relationship with your pet dog, like you're helping your dog is helping you. You understand where things are. It's now part of the human tribe. It's part of the tribe, and you can do that with the spirits as well, that you can help them continue on their path of development over time.
That's what's in it for them.
Yeah.
Or you can just trap them.
Or you can just trap them. Yeah.
Hmm.
But as we know from all the stories, they don't always stay trapped.
A friend of mine who's deeply into tantric practices has spoken to me about Indonesia. And there is a certain Indonesian tribe, or a bunch of them, I'm not too sure, that is an expert in what they call animism, which is exactly this.
Yeah.
Trapping beings, lower beings, into physical pots or bottles.
Yeah.
And these sell for a lot of money. So what is said is that there's just conjecture, and this is what I've heard in the world of spiritual gossip, that there's a lot of millionaires and billionaires all over Asia who travel to Indonesia to purchase these exact lower beings, but it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
Why is it extremely dangerous?
Because you're handing someone who isn't trained a loaded gun.
You're basically selling a pet tiger.
You're selling a pet tiger. Yeah. And that doesn't always end well.
Apparently, it's used by politicians as well.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Right? You think politicians from all over the world?
I think I know a lot of people who've traveled to Asia for these kind of services. Like I know people within my field who travel to Thailand to buy these kind of amulets and to work with these kind of amulets and to work with these kind of spirits. It happens everywhere. Yeah.
So even if one wishes to work with these spirits, you either become a 30-year veteran and understand what you're doing in detail through practice, and I'm sure there's baby steps involved.
Yeah.
Or you just buy one for a lot of money, but then the risk is that the pet tiger might want to eat you.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say leave it to the zookeepers.
Or become one yourself.
Or become one. Yeah.
I also feel that when it comes to knowledge, vidya in our culture, if you truly seek vidya, knowledge, and you're willing to chase it with hard work, it'll find a way to become accessible to you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure anyone who's watching this podcast until this point, is fascinated by this topic, there's a bunch of people who want to chase this vidya. So what's your advice to them?
Don't. Don't unless it's something which don't unless it's something which you have to do. If this is your path, if this is the thing that you have to do that speaks to you, then pursue it. But if it's something you're just a bit curious about, something which like you think might give you your ego a boost, like this is not the work that you should be doing. There are simpler, safer things you can do. To be aware that this world is out there, I think is a valuable thing. To understand that the world contains all of these elements. But for the majority of people who are householders, like it's do your mantra, do your meditation, do your puja, do your simple practices, and find balance in that. Live that life. Because the number of people who are involved with magic are very few, and they're very far between. And even in that group of people, there are many of them who it goes terribly wrong for. So, yeah, beware.
Magic can easily backfire if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're dealing with nuclear material.
You're dealing with nuclear material. Yeah.
I asked you earlier about if these spirits could cause harm, and you said that maybe not directly physically, but in other ways.
They'll cause accidents.
Like road accidents or...
Road accidents. They'll cause like people to come into your life who will do you harm. Like they'll use the tools that are around them to create these impacts.
So they can affect reality as well.
They can react. Yeah, absolutely.
There is a really scary story that I heard. Like it's probably the one so-called horror story based on a true event, which actually haunted me very deeply. It's so intense that I may not even want to repeat it on the show. So sorry, guys. But I'm not going to repeat it in detail, but I'll give you an element of it. Basically, someone had got their hands on one of these Indonesian pots which contained a couple of demons. His wife, who was pregnant, discouraged that person from keeping it. And he didn't know what he was doing. It just landed up with him. So they spoke a lot at home about getting rid of it. And the first night, when they slept, they both had the same dream of the two spirits inside that pot telling them that do not throw us away. We will come for you if you think of throwing us away. The second day they discussed this again, argued about it, whether wife really wanted to get rid of it because she understood what they're dealing with. And that night, they both dreamt of the two spirits feeding on a baby. And when they woke up, the wife had faced a miscarriage and her bed was full of blood. But this is one story that I've heard of these things causing physical harm. And the reason I'm putting this out is to put out a cautionary tale. That do not get into this realm. It's okay to have knowledge. It's okay to be fascinated by this. And I've removed much scarier layers of this story to soften it up for the end viewer. But how do you think they caused harm in this case?
I couldn't tell you the physics of it, but these things happen. Particularly, as you said, like young children, like pregnancy. Like these are times that you shouldn't be anywhere near any of this. You shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, don't do it. It's the same thing as like you shouldn't have friends who are criminals, because if you have friends who are criminals, then they will drag you into their criminal world. You will know bad people, and if you know bad people, sometimes bad things happen. So don't do it. Don't get involved with that. But this is a small percentage of the amount of spirit work that's done. And many of these spirits that are particularly dangerous, you would be foolish to try to work with them.
Even in your case?
Even in my case. There are spirits that are murderers. Do you want to have friends with murderers? I don't want to have friends with murderers.
When you say that there's spirits who are murderers, are you talking about a human being that's passed away? Or you're talking about an ancient spirit that's been a murderer traditionally?
It's difficult to tell, but it could be either of those possibilities. Some of them are dead humans. Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are dead humans.
Have you worked with dead humans?
Yeah, I've worked with dead humans.
Why?
Because not all dead humans are bad humans. Not all dead humans are bad humans. Some of them are wise.
People who you knew?
Not people who I know, no.
But how did you know that you're supposed to work with a particular dead human?
Well, through a process of divination, of working out what you're trying to do, and of talking to a spirit and discovering that a spirit, for example, was previously a human being.
Okay. Are these iconic historical figures?
Not giant historical figures, no.
Okay. Someone who just got lost in
Somebody got lost in the way. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay. But in these spirit circles where you invite these spirits, you're doing it in a very controlled manner.
You're doing it in a very controlled manner, yeah.
But you are still calling a lion or a tiger, and you need to know how to handle it.
Yeah.
You know what Ouija boards are?
Yeah.
That's an uncontrolled way of doing the same thing, right?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So what you're doing is a controlled portal?
I'm doing a more controlled method of that, yes.
But that's an uncontrolled portal.
I think it's very foolish to try to invite in any spirits which are hanging around. It's a foolish thing to do. It's foolish.
Okay. And that's how people get into trouble.
Yeah.
You're inviting misfortune into your life.
You're being extremely random. You're opening your front door and you're letting anyone who's on the street walk into your house. This is a very bad idea. This is a very bad idea. Like if you're doing this kind of work, like so Ouija's very popular because it's a quick and easy way to do it. You could use a Ouija board in a magical ritual. You could have a board in your circle and you can use it to communicate, to ask questions. But if you haven't established your parameters, if you haven't set up your wards, your guards, and you're going into it empty, it's just foolish. It's just foolish. If you want to talk to the dead, and if people particularly want to talk to their personal dead, people in their line, that's much more easy to do with a picture of someone who's died that you keep in your house, that you burn a candle in front of, that you offer water to, that you talk to who's within your family line. That's a safe thing to do.
They might visit you in your dreams.
They may visit you in your dreams. You have a relationship already. And for most people, that's the kind of work that they need to do.
Yeah. We recently had a powerful psychic on the show, and she spoke about something called the ancestral plane. So again, in Sanatan Dharma, we believe in reincarnation, which means that once you pass away, you're reborn in a body in the future. But after the time that you pass away, your soul has an option of staying near your loved ones and just looking over them.
Yeah.
So my question to the psychic was, why would my grandmom still want to be around? And she said that it's not your decision. Maybe she just loved you that much.
Yeah.
And how, if you have a child, you see the child going to school, you want to just go and drop off the kid and make sure it's okay while the kid goes to school. It's something like that, but in the spirit world. Like I know my grandmom's protecting me all the time while, I'm dealing with these kind of conversations and dealing with the process of fame. I know that I've got protection from my ancestors. Do you have anything to say about the ancestral plane?
I completely agree with you. I think most people's spirit work should really be limited to that kind of ancestor work with their immediate dead, with their parents and grandparents and their family line. I think it's a very safe thing to do because these people love and care for you, and it can be done in a very simple and easy way.
This is a spiritual purpose of your family.
Yeah.
Like even after your family members pass away, they are with you if you really wish for them to be with you.
Yeah.
And you can invite them back.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you said that all you do is light a candle in front of the photo?
Lighting a candle, having a photograph, like making an offering of like water or food. It's like this is what people have done in human culture traditionally forever. whether you're doing that kind of whether you're doing that kind of ritual on their birthday or the anniversary of their death, it's a very useful thing to do. I think everyone who wishes to work like this, if they have a good family relationship, to do those simple things, to have the pictures as a memento mori so that they remember them, and to offer them light and to offer them water, and to just talk to them. I think that's a great thing to do.
In those circles, do you also invite higher beings?
Yes, you can invite higher beings.
Like angels.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We have somewhat of a concept of angels in Sanatan Dharma. It's called Yaksha Kinnar and Gandharvas. Gandharvas are related to music. I don't exactly know what Yaksha Kinnar are related to, but they're basically benevolent higher beings. How does the purpose of a benevolent higher being vary from that of a lower being? And are all higher beings benevolent?
Again, we're back to the tigers.
It's just their nature to be more evolved.
It's their nature, and it's how they respond to you. Like how a spirit responds to me and how a spirit responds to you will differ. We'll have different interactions in the same way that you have different friends. You meet people and you immediately have a vibe from them. You can tell whether you get on with them or whether you don't get on with them.
Right.
There's some people you meet and you're just like, I can't stand this person. I can't be around. The same thing with spirits. Exactly the same thing. It depends what you're doing.
So have any of the spirits that you've invited visited you in your dreams and still try to further conversation?
Yeah, you always get I think keeping a track on your dreams is very important, because you'll often get messages through dreams.
Like what? Like what do those spirits want from you? They want a conversation or something?
Yeah, generally they want a conversation. Sometimes they want particular things. Sometimes they want something done for them. And then you're negotiating. If you do X, what is it that I can offer you that would be appropriate? So you perform a ritual, and the spirit will come to you in a dream, and you'll say, well, is there anything that I've done here which I could improve? So a classic thing would be like the incense. So if I'm meeting a spirit for the first time and I'm making an offering of an incense, I use something very general, like frankincense, for example, is like a good all-purpose incense. This is a good spiritual incense for clearing the place. And you'll make an offering of the incense and you'll allow the spirit to use that. But when you have a sense of the spirit, it will come back and it will say, actually, I would prefer it if you used this. If you offered this, we can establish a better connection if we do that. And so you can begin to make those agreements, make those pacts.
Have you ever had to battle it out?
I think that when you're starting to practice magic and you're beginning to practice magic, it's very common for people to be filled with negative thoughts, to be filled with ideas that maybe this won't work, or maybe they're skeptical, or those kind of difficulties, those small kind of niggling things that put you off what you're doing. But once you've had a solid experience and you have something you can say, I understand that this reality exists, and I can interact with it, I can change it, it can change me, then it's much easier.
Okay. While I appreciate what you said because you shed more light on your world, I was asking you about whether or not you've had a fight with these spirits.
I have had to defend my circle from spirits, but I'm a martially minded individual. And if I'm holding a magical implement, whether that's a sword or a knife or a wand, I know how to use it. So I have no problem in facing down conflict if that's what's required. But generally, it's just testing.
It's testing.
Just testing.
They're trying to see your toughness.
Trying to see. They're trying to scare you. They're trying to see, is this, can I can I gain the upper hand here?
Okay. I'm very surprised that you've not seen the Harry Potter films. Because honestly, like a friend of mine who'd spoken to me about Western magic long ago
Mm.
had told me that the Harry Potter films are loosely based on the truth.
Oh, I'm sure that J.K. Rowling has done her research and that there are many elements in it.
I would argue that J.K. Rowling has done her practice as well.
We'd have to ask J.K. when you get her on the podcast.
She's based out of Britain, right?
Yes, Scotland. Yeah.
Scotland.
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling, you're invited to the Ranveer Show. But I know for a fact that she's got some knowledge about this world.
I'm sure. Yeah.
She made magic mainstream in so many ways.
Yes, she did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does your community say about the Harry Potter series?
I think I've seen over the years that there have been many cultural artifacts which have created a rush of people towards magic. So previously in the 1980s, there were movies that made people very excited about witchcraft.
Like?
For example, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Gotcha.
Like that whole group of girls got very excited about the idea of witchcraft and magic, having watched those kind of things. So it's quite normal that when something like this happens, like Harry Potter happens, that there's a rush of excitement and that people come in and are interested in seeing what that world is, because we live in such a secular society. We live in a society that is so materialistic, that is so limited in terms of people's spiritual growth, that when they're exposed to a story, when they're exposed to those kind of ideas, then suddenly something opens in them and they're like, I want to know more about this. Like, I want my world to be enchanted. I want my world to be full of magic, you know, whether that's reading like Lord of the Rings or like The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, or, you know, any of these big alternative fantasy worlds. I think particularly amongst kids and teenagers, they're much closer to that world. They haven't closed down to the extent that many adults have. They haven't been broken by the world. They still have a sense of like possibility and growth and what if, and, you know, maybe they're still feeling things.
Yeah. That's why they say kids can see things that adults can't.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the pain of life takes that ability away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the blessings of being born in India, in that geography, is that generally speaking, you'll find people around you who either completely open themselves or who direct you towards openness. And I see this in some other cultures. Like I have some Ghanaian friends.
Yeah.
I have some Arabic friends. I have some South American friends. I see this in like, you know, the tropical belt culture a little more. Again, taking nothing away from the West, I'm deeply fascinated.
No, you're completely correct. I don't think everyone always realizes quite how secular and irreligious England is. I mean, our religious beliefs here, our church, it's really broken. Like it's not part of people's lives
anymore.
They don't have even the basic stories of the Bible. They don't know. You know, you say Adam and Eve to a class of children, and like most of them don't even know the Adam and Eve story, which is like incredible.
I kind of feel bad for some of the people born in the West in Christian families, because they grow up with a sense of not wanting to have conversation about religion because of the negative connotation that it holds. I don't know why. Like I landed in Manchester and the immigration officer asked me about my podcast. She's like, why are you here? I said, to podcast. She's like, what's your podcast about? I said, everything under the sun other than politics. I said that as a joke. And she's like, yeah, and I hope also religion. And I'm like, why? It's such it can be a beautiful topic. Then I realized that I'm speaking from an Indian perspective, where for me, religion is Sanatan Dharma and Buddhism and Islam and Christianity.
Yeah.
And for her, it's like more of a binary.
Yeah.
Right? What I sense in Europe is that the world has so much to learn from this region, this geography. But the one thing that many Europeans can learn is to find their faith in the divine once again.
Yes.
I feel it creates some level of anchoring, which you have. We're talking about Goddess Babylon, we're talking about all these topics, which, the Arab world has, which my world has, which like Southeast Asia has, South America, all these places. But people in Europe, especially, even more so than America, have forgotten the divine.
Yeah, very much so.
And it's causing mental health problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Have I said something offensive or wrong?
No, you're completely correct. You're completely correct. We live in a world which is so devoid of that understanding. And it's something that you find people who are drawn to magic and witchcraft, they're also freer to explore those things because they haven't been limited by it. They're not coming in also with like a negative framing of these ideas from Christianity. But there's also just that lack of spirituality in the culture. And I think it broke with the world wars. Yeah.
What do you mean?
I think World War I and World War II, the death and slaughter and the cultural change that happened, people just abandoned Christianity and that faith here. Like it just no longer made sense to people.
After seeing that level of death.
Yeah.
Can we speak about the world wars a little bit?
Yeah.
We speak about the world wars a lot in India, but I've noticed that in this part of the world, of course, it's spoken about so much more because it's a recent history. Do you think that there were elements of these lower or higher entities involved in the world wars?
I think if we live in a world filled with spirits, which is my model of the universe, then it's inevitable that there is a spiritual component to these things. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've heard some spiritualists say on this show that Adolf Hitler was guided by a lower entity trying to create demonic chaos in this world.
Yeah, I think he was an extremely damaged individual, taking a huge amount of methamphetamines on top of his damaged personality, which wasn't really helping things. And they were again dealing with this problem of a broken Christianity, and he did reach back to some form of a pagan past, a very limited understanding of a Germanic pagan past, but that was certainly an element that was present within the Nazi party.
You know the Nazi symbol?
The swastika, yeah.
The swastika that the Nazis use is an inverted swastika.
Yeah, yeah.
The one we use in Sanatan Dharma is one of the most divine symbols.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to divinize a space.
Yeah.
But this is an inverted swastika,
Yeah.
very similar to an inverted cross,
yeah.
which is a symbol of Satan.
Yes, yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
It looks like a sword instead of a cross.
Yeah.
So they've taken a very powerful Hindu symbol and turned it around.
Yeah.
Where, to the degree where I know a lot of people in India who think twice before getting swastika tattoos because they don't want a global audience or global person
to misinterpret.
Exactly. Yeah. Because this in the modern day, unfortunately, can be confused to be a racist symbol.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I agree with you. I think the swastika is a beautiful symbol. Like I really love the swastika, but it's so difficult in our culture because of the damage that's been done to it. And you see that it was used through the 1940s, like globally, everyone was using this symbol. And then because of the Nazi regime, it has been given such a bad reputation.
Yeah, I mean, in Sanatani Tantra, yantras and symbols, basically for us, yantras are of different kinds, but symbols are one of the key yantras. And a swastika contains a lot of power. I am pretty sure that Adolf Hitler knew this spiritual nuance and twisted it around to malevolently affect the world. To affect the world in a malevolent manner.
Yeah.
And cause that level of death and chaos and suffering in the world.
Yeah.
But it's one of those topics that people are so edgy about, like, that
Yeah.
it's not discussed.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that even through this conversation, people are going to pick up clips and take it out of context, and then I'll have to do some firefighting. It's just the nature of the internet.
Yeah.
But it's important to have these conversations
Yeah.
because, in my eyes, in so many ways, I'm trying to learn so much more from you, but I also represent my own culture.
Yeah.
And one of the most beautiful aspects of my culture has been demonized by a human being who wasn't in his senses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
While we're speaking about this particular human being, I think at this point in the podcast, it's a great place to also bring in Shaitan or Satan.
Sure.
I don't even know where to begin this topic because I actually don't like talking about it, honestly. I think it's a low frequency conversation. And whenever I speak about the Illuminati or Satan on my show, I almost feel a drain of energy.
Yeah.
And I know that's not something I want to dive deep into. So I'd love for you to give me a quick fire.
Okay. We'll do the quick one on this because this is easy to do. Okay. So Satanism can only be understood as an inversion of Christianity. So it's a Christian, it's something that Christianity to a large extent created and then projected onto all of its enemies.
And projected to all of its enemies.
Yeah. So the idea that if we look at like the classical images of like the devil or Satan with horns and like hairy and all of these things, this is in many ways a pagan deity. This is in many ways a lot of people when they were looking at this in the Victorian kind of period, they were very interested in Pan.
In what?
The Greek god Pan.
Like Peter Pan?
Yeah, the second part, Pan. So Pan is like he was quite a small deity at the time, but he was the god of like wine and sex and fertility and like, you know, like a little bit of misrule. Misrule, yeah. And so all of these aspects of like, these more animal base aspects that Christianity was opposed to.
Lust oriented.
Yeah. They all got pushed into this figure that they created called Satan. Because when you look in the Bible, it's a very mixed story about Satan and about Lucifer.
It's the same person or same thing that they're talking about, right?
They're talking about a range of different things from a range of different stories and traditions that have all been put under one name, one label. And they've said, this is the bad thing. Anyone who's not us is this thing. And this thing is where we all put all of the bad ideas. So if you look, if you think about the conscious and the unconscious, if you want to think about the mind like that, all of the bad things get pushed into this dark place. And this dark place has a label on it called Satan, saying, don't touch, don't go here. And many good things were pushed here, not just bad things, but there were good things that were pushed here as well. Particularly the body and the lessons and the truths within the body, because Christianity, when it began, was very body and life denying. There was a lot of talk about celibacy for both men and women. The body was seen as a bad thing. Even having children was seen as being a bad thing. Like it was quite a death cult when early Christianity started, first couple of centuries of Christianity. So the devil took on all of the negative characteristics that the culture didn't want to look at. And then this figure became bigger and bigger. And as the Christian church began to show itself as being not what it said it was, that it was doing bad things, many, many atrocities carried out in the world of the Christian church, some people inevitably look at the other side of the coin and they say, the Christian God is not someone I want to deal with. I'll deal with this other thing because this figure opposes Christianity. And Christianity at the same time benefited from creating this evil figure and saying, anyone who is our enemy, they're this. No, there's nothing good in this. This is kind of the cultural impact that created this figure. So it's really a projection, a shadow of Christianity that they used to control people. But Satanism, the practice of Satan worship, you can break down quite quickly. So particularly in terms of the written records for what we have, the French really invented Satanism. Like Satanism was something that you found around the French courts. And there are a couple of famous historical events that revealed that there were people who were killing children and performing abortions and poisonings. And so there was a group of people around the court of Louis with the affair of the poisons. If you want to Google something for Satanism, the affair of the poisons is where you find it, where there was an abortionist called Madame Montespan, who had a circle of people, and she was drawing them in, and this still happens today. She's drawing them in to participate in black masses, in these acts of ritualized evil. And we see this today, whether you're P. Diddy or Jeffrey Epstein, if you can compromise people in positions of power by making them participate in a bad thing, you can blackmail them. And so that was pretty much what Satanism was then. Very small thing, very elite level. At the same time, there were people persecuted throughout the society who were called Satanists. Some of them were burned as witches. You know, that's part of the story of the witchcraft trials. So that was Satanism classically, the classical period of Satanism, where you take the high Catholic mass and you flip it, you turn it on its head.
There's also a deity that goes by the name of Satan.
And so there's a deity that's called Satan that they are worshipping in return for material things and power.
But this is a real deity.
It's as real as you want it to be. It's clearly become something. So yes, it's clearly a thing.
Can collective consciousness of many human beings over centuries create a deity?
Yeah, completely.
That's what's happened.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's an egregore would be the technical term for it. It's a deity that's been produced by a lot of people coming together and creating an image and creating a cult. But Satanism is now much more confusing because this classical Satanism, which is what we often think about, black masses, blah, in the 1960s in America, there's a gentleman called Anton LaVey who founded the Church of Satan. Now, his form of Satanism, which is the most popular form of Satanism you will find today, is really quite atheistic and materialistic, and it's deliberately poking fun and mocking people for rejecting the body, for rejecting the pleasures of life. So if you look online and you search Satanists, you'll very often find people who are members of the Church of Satan, and many of them are atheists. They have no spiritual belief at all, but they like the aesthetic. They like to dress up in a certain way. They like to wear certain symbols. Some of them are practicing magic, but the majority of them aren't. And the majority of them are more like American libertarians. Yeah, like the far Republican Party, like the far right of the Republican Party, like absolute freedom. So like they'd be in favor of no gun control. They're in favor of alcohol. They're in favor of sex. They're in favor of all of these things. So it's in some ways it's quite life affirming, and they're often not bad people. I know quite a few of these people. They're fine, but it's very modern and it's a little superficial. So that was the modern Satanism that occurred in the 60s, and that's the dominant flavor of modern Satanism. If you look at if you're looking at practitioners, but because this group was so materialistic and really quite atheistic, a lot of them were atheists, there was a reaction to that. And there is a smaller group of people who are theistic Satanists. So they're people who worship Satan as a deity. And again, There are a range of people here, but most of them are actually not bad people at all. They're people who are just ultra liberal, ultra libertarian. They're not doing awful things. And then we have a third level. So the third level is what you'll find if you get your information from Twitter and YouTube. Yeah. And this is where there's an idea that there is an elite group of bad people who are doing bad things because they are Satanists.
Illuminati.
The Illuminati, like all of that nonsense that we as magical practitioners then have to deal with because we're placed in that category.
I mean, yeah, that's a thought at the back of my head throughout this podcast that you're going to be called satanic at the...
Always.
You're already called satanic.
Yeah, it's not a problem. Like, it's not a problem because they simply don't understand the technical terms. Now, I could describe myself technically as a Luciferian. Okay. So what I do with my reading of the Bible is I would split the ideas of Satan as the opposer and Lucifer as the light bringer. And I would say that my tradition is to do with the Luciferian aspect, is to do with freedom, is to do with beauty, it's to do with the body, it's to do with light, yeah, as opposed to the satanic aspect, which is to do with the dark, is to do with transgression, and it's particularly linked up with, human sacrifice, all that kind of nonsense, which really I've never come across any of this practice.
Before we move forward, simple question for you. What do you want for humankind?
I want the evolution of humankind. I want us to fulfill our destiny and return to the stars.
Okay. When you meet people or when you see other human beings, what do you feel, Peter?
I love human beings. Okay. Yeah, I think human beings are great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's move on.
Yeah. But it's important to do because these technical terms get turned into a mess very, very quickly. Certainly, there are what people would understand to be Satanists in the world, by which I mean people who worship a deity called Satan and gather together in small groups and do bad things. But this is a blackmail racket. Again, as I said, this is P. Diddy, Jeffrey Epstein style entrapment. And this is something that we found in our cultures for a long time. And very often, as you look into it, you discover that it's intelligence services behind it, because it's very useful to be able to blackmail people who are in positions of power. But as for an all-powerful satanic conspiracy, I have seen no evidence of such a thing. Small groups of compromised blackmail people in the elites, absolutely. Global Satanism is a fantasy.
Got it. So the Illuminati is not controlling our world.
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay. I'm actually going for dinner with the Rockefellers at some point, and they're the name associated with the Illuminati.
Yeah.
They're visiting India. If I get to do a podcast with them, this is what I intend on asking them. How do you guys feel about this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a good question to ask.
Right?
Because, certainly there are people who you see playing with those symbols and ideas in positions of power. Absolutely.
But why?
Generally, sexual kicks. Generally for shock value.
To be spoken about?
To be spoken about. To hold power over other people by appealing to those symbols of crushing dangerous power.
We mentioned P. Diddy and Epstein. Do you think they were also involved in any kind of ritualistic practice?
I'm not aware that they were involved in any kind of ritualistic practice. But I think all humans tend towards ritual behaviors. But a specific magical, organized process of performing ritual, I don't think those individuals were, no.
Got you.
No.
Okay. your partner's in the room with us, and I was just telling her that I've manifested this conversation for years. And I'm not one of those people who believes in the power of manifestation. I think it is a thing. But again, in the nucleus of my culture, they say that only manifest the divine, everything else will follow. Um, but in my heart, as a content creator, I've wanted to meet someone like you for ages and have this exact conversation. It's one conversation that we split up into two parts. And um, is there a reason you choose to wear black?
Yeah, yeah. It's quite traditional in Western magical culture that if you're engaged in this kind of work, that very often you'll find that people just wear black.
Just wear black.
Yeah.
You just wear black?
I literally only wear black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could do the same in my core.
Mm.
I met an Indian tantric once who said that, yeah, if you're engaged with Kalima, you will naturally be drawn to black in color. So I see a parallel again.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Right? You said that you had an ayahuasca experience in South America.
Yeah.
Now, again, on the surface, for people who are not informed about ayahuasca, they'd assume that it's just a psychedelic substance. Is it a party drug? No, it's not. It's a powerful spiritual device that opens up access to other realms. Would you agree?
Yeah, completely. Well, I spent a week in the Amazon, about 2 days journey from civilization, and up a river with a shaman and a group of people, and we drank. I think we drank five. I think we had five sessions with a very strict dieta. So we were. I dieted for a month before it with no meat, no coffee, no chocolate, no alcohol, no sex, no like all of those requirements. And then while we were there, I did dieta with a plant called cat's claw. So I was drinking probably 4 liters of cat's claw a day and eating a very limited amount of calories and diet. So plantain, quinoa, maybe some fish, but like really quite a low calorie diet. And I enjoy the discipline, and I enjoy being in a space like that when I can devote myself to a serious piece of spiritual work. So I was in a tambo by myself. I went with my partner, but we were like separate from each other for the trip, and we were guided through the experience by a native shaman, a very skilled shaman, who performed the rituals in the native fashion. So previously, a lot of the ayahuasca that you can drink in the West is through a Brazilian church called the Santa Daime, and Santa Daime, they have a Christian approach to it. So they split up men and women, and they sing Christian songs, and they have a different method about the way they go about it. And I didn't want anything to do with that. That was not going to be my approach. So we went and we drank with the shaman with a group of people who traveled out for it, including one of my dear friends who was recovering from some significant heart surgery. So one of the reasons that I went was to support him as he was going through his healing experience. You know, it's very important for me to be there and to help him with what he was going through. And what I gained from ayahuasca, and I've taken a significant number of other like mind-altering substances and drugs through my time as a magician. Like it's been part of my practice to explore these realms. But ayahuasca is very different. They describe it as a teaching plant, and the experience of drinking the plant medicine and having the shaman singing the icaros, the sacred songs, and him charming the plant within your body and the spirit within your body is an extremely powerful experience. So you'd spend the day in quiet contemplation and then spend the evening drinking the ayahuasca, which for people who haven't experienced it is it's a difficult thing to drink. Even like a small shot glass of ayahuasca has got a very bitter taste. And the effect of the medicine is also to make you purge. So you vomit and you bring a lot of things out of you. And as a magician, it was a real privilege to see a plant master in the Amazon and his relationship both to the spirit of the plant and his mastery of the plant and the way he could manipulate it internally inside a whole group of people all going through different kinds of healing crises was spectacular. I could see many parallels with the kind of work that I do on a different level. It was to see another magical practitioner was fundamentally exciting. Again, in our previous conversation, we talked about other entities and lower entities. Having a shaman is extremely important to this experience because drinking ayahuasca pulls in a lot of these lower entities, and you need a shaman to keep the space clear of these kind of spirits. And those kind of spirits, hungry spirits in the jungle, certainly came looking for food.
They wanted to feed on human emotion.
Yeah, they want to feed on human emotion. Yeah. And so I had a very good conversation with the spirit of ayahuasca because...
You mean Mother Ayahuasca?
Yeah.
The female entity, which is...
the female entity within it.
Okay, I'll have to give some context.
Yeah, do.
Ayahuasca ceremonies are being studied by neurologists all over the world because they have found some scientific proof behind the changes that ayahuasca can create in a human mind. Secondly, the one commonality that everyone feels while doing ayahuasca is that they feel the presence of a feminine deity in many cases. I won't say everyone, but in many cases. And another commonality is the purge.
No, I had the same thing. I could feel my face running with tears despite not feeling like any sadness. But the spirit of ayahuasca, you very much feel the goddess. You feel the spirit of the plant engaged with you in a way that I haven't found with any of the other plants or substances that I've used. She's a very particular spirit. And in that particular context of the Amazon was like an even more powerful experience. And as a Western magician, a lot of the things I do are to do with, there's a lot of secrecy. There are a lot of secrets that you keep. And she just like ran through my head and pulled everything out, went through everything. And it was quite funny because she was going through all of the symbols that I have in my system from Western magic. And she was kind of going, oh, this is new. Oh, what's this? And it was kind of I spent the first 3 days trying to build up a way for us to have a language in which we could communicate because we were coming from such different worlds.
Yeah. They say that everyone who does ayahuasca and encounters the mother views her in a different visual form. What was it for you?
I had a lot of serpents. I had a lot of snake stuff. Like she came with a lot of like kind of anaconda snake material.
As in she was a snake herself?
Yeah, she was a snake. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But it was a very powerful experience. It's not my medicine, like in that it's not something that I will necessarily return to. I feel very privileged to have had the experience and the encounter, but that's not where my work lies. Like I know what my work is, but I think that the impact of ayahuasca on the spiritual development of the world is profound. And I think it's only just started.
Yeah. I think many, many human beings all over the world are going to discover ayahuasca over the course of their lifetime. But of course, we live in a society where there's a lot of preconceived notions about mind-altering substances because that's what we're told by society. And in no way are we promoting the use of harmful substances like cocaine and heroin.
Yeah.
And mind you, I think ayahuasca can be harmful in excess and if you are doing it in an unguided manner.
Yeah.
You need a shaman to be able to do it. You need to do it in its purest form. and you need to do it with some kind of intention attached to your ceremony. My question to you, Peter, is that you've already interacted with beings from other realms.
Mm.
Other than Mother Ayahuasca, could you interact with beings from other realms as well?
Yeah, I think I think she's such a powerful spirit to encounter. I think you can shortcut years and years of personal work by going and learning from ayahuasca. But as you said earlier, there are dangers with this, and you were talking about the dangers of Western magic and whether I'd seen people who it had gone wrong for. Probably the worst person that I've seen from a spiritual perspective was a woman who had gone and drunk ayahuasca and apprenticed with a shaman and taken a lot of plant drugs in that process. And to me, she was the most spiritually damaged person I've ever seen. So it is important to have a shaman, but it's also important to be aware that not all shamans have your best interests at heart.
That was her mistake.
Yeah. She made a very bad mistake.
When we're talking about ayahuasca, we're talking about shamans. This is their version of Tantra.
Yeah.
They use plant medicine as well. The active molecule in ayahuasca is DMT, in the same way that cannabis contains THC. Now, DMT can also be smoked in a synthetic form, and Joe Rogan keeps talking about this in his podcast. They say that everyone who smokes DMT enters a realm where they get to meet interdimensional creatures or beings, interdimensional beings that are not malevolent. And it's a very intense experience for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you come out. Have you done that as well?
No, but the problem that I see with DMT is exactly what you described, is that you're shot into this reality and everything happens very quickly and you come out of it and it's very difficult to bring something back. And as a magician, like I'm always, with an experience like this, I always want to bring something back with me from that world to work on or to deal with. And I'm not sure that smoking DMT enables you to do that in a very effective fashion. Whereas the beauty of ayahuasca, what I found very helpful was that the first maybe hour of having ingested the drug, you're in a light state where you can do a lot of work. You can get a lot of work done before the really powerful effects kick in. It's quite malleable at that stage with the icaros and the songs, and you're able to process and do a lot of self-work in that period before things become much more intense. And I think you miss that with the smoked DMT. I think it's just too rapid.
Okay. Are you comfortable sharing what your intention behind doing the ayahuasca was?
Yeah, I was doing a few things. One, as I say, I wanted to be there for my friend because I was concerned that he was going to die of the condition that he was having. And he was going through this major health crisis. And it was very important for me knowing my strengths and my ability to be there, to be present for him while he was going through that crisis. And what I found with ayahuasca was that I've been working on myself for a long time. So there weren't any huge surprises for me in what ayahuasca was able to show me about myself or other things. I learned some useful things. I learned some things about animals. I learned some things about plants and my relationship to these different spirits. I learned a lot about the jungle. But the most important thing that I probably learned from ayahuasca is that I already have my path.
Gotcha. It confirmed your reality.
It confirmed what I was doing.
What did you pick up about animals?
Well, I had a few experiences with some of the animals in the jungle. I won't name them just out of discretion, but the relationship that I had with the animals that I encountered in the jungle, both during the dieta and then subsequently during the ayahuasca experiences where they returned to me and taught me things, was extremely valuable.
We consider snakes divine in India.
Yeah.
Again, Sanatan Dharma, we had, it's said that there was an ancient race of higher beings called the Nagas. And Nag in Sanskrit means snake. So they say that modern day snakes are actually descendants of those higher beings.
Yeah.
But they've kind of almost like gone back on the evolutionary ladder. And it's kind of like what chimpanzees are to human beings, snakes are to Nagas.
Yeah.
So they're cousins, but a little backward in the evolutionary ladder.
Yeah.
But Nagas themselves are believed to have left the earth or are on earth, but are evolved enough to keep themselves hidden.
Yeah.
Perhaps in the oceans, perhaps deep inside forests. And they are revered. They're prayed to in some parts of India. And they're associated with the god Shiva, which is also my personal deity. Like what Babylon is to you, Shiva is to me. Each Hindu child has their own favorites. And at different phases of their life, they're drawn to one more than the others. In my late 20s, I've discovered the power of Shiva in a very intense way. And there's a form of Shiva called Kal Bhairav. And they say that generally Bhairav is waking up in India again. It's been a deity which is slightly dormant, but it's a very powerful deity that eventually leads you to Ma, or the mother. It can lead you to Kali, or at least the divine feminine. Bhairav is represented by a black dog in many cases. So is Anubis, the Egyptian deity. And a friend of mine, Rajashi Nandi, the expert on Tantra, he thinks that there's way too many parallels between Anubis and Bhairav for them to be two different deities. He thinks that Bhairav expresses itself in Egyptian culture as Anubis. I'd love to know if you know anything about black dogs, because there's another plant medicine called Datura, which is also in Sanatan Dharma associated with Shiva. It's used by advanced Tantra practitioners and Aghoris, but it's a very, very, very dangerous plant medicine to use.
Yeah.
I will let you take this tangent forward wherever you wish.
Yeah. So let's do Datura briefly. All of the solanaceous alkaloids, the alkaloid that you find in Datura, you find in a range of the European witchcraft plants. So you find it in belladonna, henbane, Datura. These all have this same problem. The difficulty with using them, as you point out, is that the doses in them are very difficult to get correct. Like the difference between like one flower and another, one seed and another, it can be significant. They're a very, very dangerous plant to consume because they're disassociative. So it's very difficult to tell the difference between what's happening around you and what's real and what's not real. So you can get yourself into a lot of danger with these plants. And I would never recommend people to ingest or work with the plants in those ways. But clearly they've been used in witchcraft traditions. And I know people who use them in limited forms, like as a salve, as a topical salve. The other one is mandrake, mandragora. You can extract mandrake in wine. I've worked with mandragora extracted in wine as a ritual tool. But these are quite rightly like put to one side as dangerous plants. I'd recommend, if people are on a spiritual path, that they look at ayahuasca rather than looking at those kind of things. Black dogs.
In the same way that people who've experienced ayahuasca experience the female deity, they say that everyone who has experienced Datura experiences the presence of a black dog.
Right.
So yeah, I'd love to know what you think of black dogs.
So we have black dogs in a lot of English folklore. We get a black dog appearing as a portent of, like, everything gets called the devil because we had all of our things leveled. But But spectral black dogs are very much part of the English landscape. We've got hundreds of accounts of those over time.
What do you mean by spectral black dogs?
They may or may not be real.
Ah,
They may or may not be real.
perhaps a spiritual being.
Perhaps a spiritual being. Yeah.
In my eyes, it's an element of Bhairav or this Anubis, or I don't know what the European equivalent deity would be.
Yeah, we don't have a Hecate is sometimes associated with the black dog.
Hecate,
Yeah, the Greek goddess of witchcraft.
Greek goddess.
Yeah, because people would traditionally sacrifice dogs to her at crossroads. That was the traditional offering.
Sacrifice dogs.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. You said that a lot of the European practitioners, will always keep a Ganesha murti.
Yeah. Ganesha is everywhere. Like it's very common for people to have it because he's so benefic that people he gets everywhere, regardless of whether you're looking for Ganesh or not. He seems to be one of these gods that is out in the world and is happy to talk to people from different traditions.
They in Sanatandam, they say that any deity which has an animal face is easily reachable as compared to the deities with human faces.
Yeah.
It's not so much about hierarchy as much as it is about accessibility. So he's a very accessible deity.
Yeah.
And in Sanatandam, I've done countless podcasts on the subject of Ganesha. The two core learnings I have is that he is the remover of obstacles, and that's what Hindus pray to him for. And secondly, he's the deity of the lowest chakra, the root chakra, which allows you to ground yourself and be stable. So before we begin a large ritual like someone's marriage or a very large havan, it usually begins with a prayer to Ganesha to stabilize you and to stabilize the geography that you're in.
Yeah.
Similar to why you use Ganesha?
Yeah. That's what he gets used for by a lot of people. He's very popular. He's very popular. I think partly because when we're exploring the Western tradition, we're looking at a broken tradition. We're looking at a tradition which is strong in some areas. So we're strong in terms of magical books. We're weak in terms of like necessarily deity and people's connection to deity. So when people are looking for that, then Ganesh just fits this gap and seems happy to do so. And so for people to have a statue and to make puja to just do small offerings, sweets and incense and candles, and like it's a good benefic for people to have around. So he's found a place.
Most Sanatanis do not pray to Ganesha every single day. And you're a Western practitioner of European magic who prays to Ganesha every day.
Not every day, but like I have Ganesha and I burn candles from like most days. Yeah.
Got you. Do you use mantras as well?
I don't use mantra with him because I haven't been given a mantra, but I could use mantra with it.
So there are mantras which you need to be given by a guru or someone who has practiced with the mantra. And these are tantric mantras.
Yeah.
You can't just use a tantric mantra and expect that it'll work. Or it can actually cause chaos in your life if you use it. But there are softer mantras, easier ones that you can use.
Yeah.
So the common one, I'll write this down and send it to you, but it's a longer mantra.
Sure.
But I've always noticed that when you attach a longer mantra to a deity and you say that mantra with reverence, as well as after you've understood the meaning of it, your connection with the deity increases further and the deity is even more present in your life.
Yeah. Well, that would be a wonderful exchange.
Yeah. The mantra's a little long. I'll say it if you want, because I also want to say it in this particular episode as a thank you to him.
Yeah.
Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurmedeva Sarvakayeshu Sarvada. In the pronunciation, just like mine.
Yeah.
So you with mantras, if you're saying it out loud, you have to get the pronunciation right.
Yeah.
And ideally get it right even in your own mind.
Yeah.
But 108 times every day will cause that deity to come closer to you.
Yeah.
108 is a very important number when it comes to mantras. It's one entire mala for us. Mala is like a rosary.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's shorter mantras like Om Namah Shivaya,
Yeah.
which is like the easiest mantra for Shiva. But you can also use Om Namah Shivaya to like meditate. So if you just sit in meditation, that's a soft mantra.
Yeah.
And then there's much more fierce mantras as well. And there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
So even I have not reached the most fierce mantras, but I have been given mantras which are not for everyone.
Yeah.
Not fierce, but they're like kind of the beginner, they're the second level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not for everyone, honestly. Causes a lot of, it causes challenges in your material life as well.
Yeah.
So it's testing your strength. If you're able to pass those tests, you'll come out good. And yeah, but Ganesha is a soft deity and very, very friendly, very nice. It's kind of like, imagine the relationship you have with at least for me, because in Sanatan Dharma, you share personal relationships with the deity. And for me, it almost gives me a younger sibling kind of energy. Though I know it's Ganesha, it's a god, but there's a loving younger sibling stabilizing me, keeping me happy. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just like flowing away into my emotion.
No, it's perfect. Yeah.
They also say that emotions matter a lot in Sanatan Dharma. Are emotions a part of your magic?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
How do you use emotion?
I think unless you're emotionally involved with something, it doesn't become alive. Like you have to engage every aspect of yourself with these things. So if you're not tapping into your emotions, if you're not allowing these things to rise out of you, then you're probably not practicing.
Yeah. What else would you like to know from Indian culture? Like in your heart, you've been practicing magic for 30 years now.
Sure.
But you're a lifelong student.
Yeah.
So what are you trying to understand through Indian culture? Like how can Indian culture help someone like yourself or your community?
Well, I think it helps to see an animistic, pantheistic, flourishing deity, an example of the way that people have a complete, it seems like such a full universe that you inhabit because of your understanding of the way that deities are ever present in your lives, are ever present in the way that you do your lives, the way that you approach ritual, the way that you approach every aspect. It's so wonderful to see when you live in a largely secular culture, to see people with that level of practice and difference, that you have a culture that contains many different kinds of practitioners, all of whom are walking their own paths towards something. So the example of India, I think, is so powerful for us in the West to see what our tradition could become, because we're really probably only 100 or 200 years into like the rebirth of the Western tradition, coming out of like the wreckage of a broken Christianity and trying to understand who we are in the world and what we have to offer. And I think we can learn from all cultures because we're all in this journey together.
One of the things we celebrate in India when it comes to Sanatan Dharma is the fact that it's survived over hundreds of thousands of years. And that's what all of us believe. I do believe that your culture is hundreds of thousands of years old as well. Probably we originated from the same origin point on some level. Perhaps some of your ancestors were as Sanatani as my ancestors. But I believe that over the course of time, some pieces of your cultural story have been stripped off or destroyed.
Yeah.
And I think that people like yourself are going to rebuild those lost cultural pieces of tradition. Peter, I invite you to India. I want to thank you for this spectacular conversation because honestly, being very transparent with you, I almost feel like I got a message from Ganesha saying, hey, this is a good end to the episode. So just feel like stopping.
No, that's wonderful, Ranveer, and thanks for sharing your time and knowledge. It's been great.
It's very rare that I do a 4.5, 5 hour conversation with anyone. it's even rarer that I feel a higher energy level after doing the 5-hour conversation. So, man, God bless you. And thank you for being a part of this podcast. Thank you for being in my life. I've really prayed to the divine to send someone like you into the world of the Ranveer Show, and just feeling very blessed to be in your presence, because I feel I've not even tapped into 5% of everything you've seen and done in your life.
That's great.
So thank you so much.
Perfect.
Really appreciate you. Thank you. That was the episode for today, ladies and gentlemen. Give us feedback on both the episodes. And if you've not watched the first conversation that we had with Peter, please go check it out. It's as heady as this one. It sets some solid context for this episode as well. Do send in your guest recommendations. We love covering the horror genre on this show, and it's a genre that's present in every single country all over the world. Ranveer will be back to bring you some more horror content soon. Thank you for listening in.